Hey, what's going on, everybody? James here, and we are back with another video today where we're going to talk a little bit about themed collecting and how to build a themed luxury watch collection. Because the beauty of this industry and hobby is that there are so many options, and you can do all sorts of fun things with your collection. So today I'm going to share a little bit about my journey behind my collection. And we're going to dive into how you could think about building your own collection in a way that's intentional and relevant for you. So thanks again for stopping by. Do please like and comment the video and subscribe to the channel so that, when I put these types of things up there, you do get a notification and, share if it's relevant and find some ideas that may be helpful for you. So let's talk a little bit about some of the principles behind building my themed collection. And there's a couple of things going on here. Obviously, there's a blue dial theme that's happening, so let's just acknowledge that right off the bat. But there's some other things happening within that. And so the first principle that I think about with my collection is brands that I understand and appreciate. So again, one of my, the first brand that I really got to understand and appreciate was Rolex, of course. And so, the Sky Dweller was a natural choice for me just based on the next one as well, which is the use case and functionality that work for my lifestyle. Because again, if you have a watch that you're tempted to let sit in a safe somewhere, I would highly advise against not going with that piece because who cares? Like if you're going to let it sit in a safe and not wear it, some people, that might be a hot take. Someone wants to let their watches appreciate in value and all those things. Hey, if that's your game, more power to you. But that is definitely not the purpose for me. The purpose for me is, again, finding brands that I appreciate and understand and having something that I'm going to wear. There's got to be a use case in there for me. So, Rolex was my first one. JLC was by far my second love in the watch world, just because of the brand heritage that it has and the design language, which I've talked about in some of my other videos as far as like why JLC, in my opinion, is such an amazing and underrated brand. So those are just two examples of how I kind of got started on that. But then you've also got to think about what is the theme. What is the theme? And again, if you look at some of the pieces in my collection, you notice the theme, right? They are blue. They're blue. They're some form of blue. Now, did that just kind of happen? Actually, it did. But then I really got to like it. It was a personal style choice for me that I just tend to wear a lot of dark colors. And I really like navy and different variants of blue. And so when I was thinking about a watch collection, that's kind of the underlying theme, along with those other aspects that I thought really worked for me. Now, let's talk about this most recent acquisition, which again, you may have seen my review, this Girard-Perregaux 1966 Orion. Now, you might say, James, that's not really a blue dial, and I might debate you a little bit and say, well, it kind of is. It's dark. It almost looks black, but it's actually a very, very deep blue. Now, of course, when you hold it next to something like the Reuter DR02, it looks basically black. But as I mentioned in the review, when you put it up against something that is entirely black, like the surface of this desk, you can see that it's actually a very, very deep, almost like a midnight blue. And so that's where I think the aesthetic variety and uniqueness comes in, because again, I really like interesting dials. And Rolex, as great as they are, tend to have just your basic kind of like sunburst dials, maybe some brushing looking dials, or like a chalky white, they have that kind of stuff. But I was looking for something kind of really next level, and that's why I found the JLC. And so I liked the enamel. So I thought to myself, okay, what's kind of another form of that? Well, aventurine. Aventurine is another form of enamel, just obviously done very differently. No guilloche work or anything like that on this dial, but certainly you still have the aventurine, which is beautiful and stunning in so many respects. So that's a few of the principles behind how I got to where I am with my collection today. But I also want to talk about what else could you do, right? Because I understand that not everybody is going to say, James, I really just want to build a blue collection that has one of each brand. We got to call that out too, right? I'm not duplicating any brands here, because that's just something that I've decided for my collection, is I want to do a wide collection, not necessarily a deep collection, of a certain brand or of a couple of brands. So let's talk about how else you could do this. One thing that I do think about, and as watch collectors, we have these ideas all the time. One thing that I do think about is, again, Rolex is a fantastic brand, despite maybe some people who are not a fan of it because it's mass produced and mass marketed and all that. But the reality is, y'all, they make fabulous watches. They're high quality, they're durable, and they have great functionality and complications. So I have definitely thought about, for instance, trading in, some pieces and doing like a precious metal sky dweller, right? As like a dress, kind of a dress and travel complication, something like the white gold with probably a white dial is most likely what I would do on Oyster Flex if I was going to do that. And then doing something like a ghost Daytona as my kind of casual go everywhere and do everything watch. So that would be a really easy two-piece collection. And again, I'd be moving away from my blue theme there because they don't necessarily have a white gold sky dweller in blue. But that's just something that I've thought about, right? That would be one way you could do it, because Rolex has enough different lines in its family that you could do that. Another way I've thought about doing this is with JLC. Again, I love JLC. It's one of my favorite brands in the watch space. So, and they have a ton of complications too, or different use cases, right? So it would be very easy for me to say, you know what, I'm going to trade up to something a little higher end for my dress, or daily business kind of piece. Something like the Grand Tradition Tourbillon Cylindrique with the perpetual calendar would be a great choice, as my dress watch. And then something for more of an everyday, I love the Mariner Memo Box in blue, just a fantastic piece. And that would allow me to stick with my blue theme in my collection, so just another thought as far as how you could go about it, going mono brand, for instance. Other ways you could go about it, some people have a certain amount of pieces from each brand, or they want to have a sport and a dress, or a sport, a dress, and a diver, or there's different ways that you can approach this topic, and there's not a right or wrong here. You just have to explore not so much what you think is cool, but what you have, I've said this before, a positive brand association with. Like, what do you know and love about the brand? Because if it's just what you think is cool, I'm telling you, as watch collectors, we have those things all the time. And, one day it'll be one thing, and another day it's going to be something else. So you really need to find some grounding. And for me, that's always been okay, what brand associations do I have with these different brands? I don't mean like, I work for them or I get paid to do this or anything. Nothing like that. Just, Grand Seiko is a perfect example. And a really great association to the brand overall. And then when I saw them in person, I was blown away, just blown away by how beautiful they are, and the nature-inspired dials and themes that they take for a lot of their pieces, and the technology, right? Spring Drive, which is pretty amazing. If you have not looked at what Spring Drive actually does, would highly recommend checking that out. So just some different ways to think about it. Again, do you like all divers? Some people are just like, I love the chunky diver and I want it on my wrist and I love that feeling. That's great. Like, go and do that. That's awesome. So find out for yourself what you really like. And that's kind of the decision-making piece that I'm going to end with here is like, how do you make these decisions for yourself? So that you don't necessarily need this type of content. Now, I'm not saying that it's bad to watch videos or you shouldn't be exploring. I'm exploring all the time. But I think it's very important to have your own path and to not get caught, I'm going to say this, not get caught up in the hype. Again, the blue sky dweller was a hot watch, but that's not why I purchased this watch. I purchased this watch because of all the things that I just said. And then I found out actually as I was trying to purchase it, that it was a really hot, popular watch or whatever. And so that made it a little more challenging to get. But I was able to get one. So that's where you got to figure out for yourself. What do you like the most? Number one, and I keep bringing that back to brand. Like, what fascinates you about the brand, about the functionality of the watch, ring command, right? Like, I love technology and the fact that the ring command bezel is part of the movement. Fascinating, right? I loved that aspect of it. And most exciting and useful. It's got to be useful. Do not just pile up a watch collection that just sits there, because who cares? Who cares? And again, if you like having, just knowing that you have all these watches sitting in your box or wherever you keep them, like, great, that's great. But that's not how I roll. I'm much more about, if I'm going to have watches, I want them to have use cases for my daily life that make sense for me and that I can have fun and enjoy wearing. So that's really a big piece. And then, of course, I've talked about it before, budget constraints. It's a real thing. You do not have an unlimited budget, unless you are extremely, extremely wealthy. Majority of us in the collection are not, or in the hobby are not. We are using our incomes from our jobs or businesses or whatever we're doing to do this as a hobby, and that's why it's fun. So your budget is going to be important as well. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of guidance and direction on how you can build an intentional and themed watch collection. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, again, I want you to get out of watches whatever it is that you want to get out of watches, because I want you to know and love the watches that you have so that you can be a satisfied collector. So thanks again for stopping by. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.